today is the official day of my 30th birthday. But actually it has been 4 years since I was converted to Christianity on the day of my official 26th birthday. I want to make a new video presentation for this channel in which I will explain what I am or who I am, so that the new viewers and subscribers can know a part of my story, I guess. And I will put a link to 2 songs in this video. Comme Etoile by a French rapper, and Mirror by Lil Wayne. And in this video I will speak as an empirical individual, because I identify myself, I have identified myself with what Hegel calls the concept, to try to explain to people what I mean when I speak about God. God is 3 in 1, as far as I envision. A singularity, which is the individual that you see here. Luca is my name. I have particularities, my age, which makes me belong to a particular generation, my ethnic origin, my gender, my occupation, my citizenship, I am a French citizen, etc., etc. And a universality, which is immaterial, in a sense that it is my mind, which I express through my words when I speak the truth. The truth is universal, it is the same for every thinking consciousness. And this trinity, the singularity, the particularities, and the universality, is what I call God. And the reason why every human being is made in the image of God is because every thinking human is a singular individual with his or her own personal story and psychology and memories, etc., with particularities and a universality which is potentially identical with my universality and with the universality of every other thinking human. So yeah. And when I started this channel the first time, it was, I think, June 2018, I knew myself to be the negative and reason, in the language of Hegel. And when I restarted again at the end of February 2022, I knew myself again to be the negative and reason, but I have developed, and I have understood, I should have understood this earlier, but I understood, I think last week, that I am what Hegel calls the absolute ID. The absolute ID. It is the subject which differentiates himself from himself and is in relation to its own objectivity. So I am the subject and the world is my object, and that's all there is. It's a lot, but and in August 2018 I had an experience of becoming conscious that I was God. Actually, I later realized that it was just reason, not the real God, but actually I thought that it was me becoming God, and actually that I remember saying or writing that the probability that I would become God was 100%, because the reasoning was I am a subject, and I knew because of my philosophical background that there is only one substance, namely that the entire universe is one, that everything in it is interconnected. And I knew that Hegel talked about the substance becoming a subject, and I said to myself, but I am a subject. Maybe I am the subject of the substance. Maybe I am the only subject that has ever existed and that will ever exist. And that's a very simple way that I realized that I was God, and in the sense that my consciousness produces reality. I became aware that I was the consciousness of the whole of reality, and that I had always been without being aware of this, and that I would always be this consciousness, and that whatever exists exists through my consciousness. And I wrote what I felt at the moment in August 2018, and I published these writings in 2019 when I tried to share my ideas on this channel, and someone preserved them and put them on a website, alt-censored. If you write cultural Hegelianism, you can find the videos that I published in 2019 and some of my writings of I think August 2018. And I have not reread what I wrote, but I will speak what I remember having thought. I was no, I will first, now that I have I've talked about my God experience, now I will talk about my empirical life chronologically, with the events that I consider to be important, and I will then talk about this God experience of 2018. But here I will tell my personal story, so that the others, those who experience themselves as different from me, and in a sense they are, but we are nonetheless identical in mind, so to speak, so that they might understand me and that I might understand myself through them. My first memories, I think, date from 1995. Memories of my biological father. So I was officially born in 1992, but my consciousness, as far as I can remember, emerged probably in 1995. And I had a happy childhood in a relatively well-off Western society. I never lacked any material need of any sort. I could travel. I had a happy childhood. But the only source of suffering that I felt was the absence of my father. I did not consciously think about this, but all the sufferings that I have endured were caused by the absence of a father. In my early teenage years, I went to a religious school, but I was not much into religion, but I was a good student, nothing special to report. I mean, not I could talk about my life, but that's not the purpose. But yeah, the I was very well, and still am, on a as an empirical individual. I am polite, well mannered, well educated, but there is something deeply wrong with me, I guess. And in my childhood or early teenager, I don't remember having done real evil to anyone, but I remember having not having done the right thing, not having done the good thing, while knowing that it was the good thing, because of a lack of will, a lack of strength. When people were being bullied or bothered, I knew that it was wrong, but I lacked the strength to impose myself and to defend them, because I was afraid of contradicting friends who were more charismatic. Or so all the evils that I did in my childhood and early teenage years was not conscious evil, but I did not do good while knowing that it was good, because that's how I envision it. I lacked moral character and moral strength and moral courage. And all my sufferings, I blamed them, consciously or unconsciously, on the absence of a father, because I had no masculine father figure of order and strength. So I did not think about this much, but I reflect upon this later, that I blamed all my evils on the absence of my father. That's a recurrent feature of my life. Then an event which had enormous consequences upon my life. When I was 15 years old, I fell deeply and passionately, romantically in love with a girl who was 1 year older. And for 8 months in 2008, I experienced bliss and happiness and love, and I was passionately, infinitely, absolutely in love with her. And yeah. And after that, in 2009, I started to develop skin problems, and I was ashamed of my physical appearance. I was afraid of being rejected by the girl that I loved, and by my friends, especially by the person that I loved. So I was so afraid of being rejected that I isolated myself, and I abandoned everyone and everything. I abandoned school, I abandoned my friends, I abandoned the girl that I loved, and I isolated myself at the age of 17, and I lived trapped in my room at first for 4 years. In the early months or years, I still went out, sometimes very rarely in city to buy things, but that was very rare. But over the years it would become more and more rare, and eventually I would almost not go out in public at all. So between 2009 and 2013, I wasted my life trapped in my room, doing basically nothing significant. And in 2013, I had sort of a shock. I realized that I was wasting my life, and that people my age were having a life. I was thinking in terms of Western standards, of people going to parties, enjoying themselves, having a social life, having friends, girlfriends, I did not want a girlfriend because I was nostalgic of the girl that I lost. But anyway, having going to parties, having a social life, having an education, a higher education, a job already, and simply living a life that I envision to be a good life for the ordinary Western person. But then I gave up on that idea and I said, actually what I miss the most is a sense of recognition and prestige, in the sense that I felt that I lacked the need for a diploma. I wanted to be recognized and to obtain social status. I mean, not consciously, because I was not willing to go into society because of my physical appearance, but I said eventually my purpose will be to get a degree or a diploma to prove to myself or to others that I am worth something, that I'm not completely dumb, because I felt such a lack of knowledge. I felt stupid because I had left, dropped out of high school, so I had no diploma, and it was in 2013 that I really started to feel dumb and stupid, and I tried to compensate this inferiority complex, I guess, by reading a lot of books, and I resumed my studies at distance. So 2013 is the moment when I started to become a book addict and to spend most of my days reading books. First to study, to obtain a diploma by correspondence or whatever, and eventually to become the entire content of my life, reading books. And I still did not get out, except to do some sports sometimes, but I had no social relations except a very few people in my family or whatever, but no social relations. I did not go to the hairdresser, to the bakers, I didn't go outside to buy groceries, I didn't go into the street because I was afraid, etc. And in 2016, back then I was some sort of a radical ecological communist, and a terrorist attack occurred in France. A priest was murdered, which made me question my worldview, because my leftist worldview was unable to explain how this event had occurred. And that's when I started to, what I would call my intellectual awakening. I started to investigate, to question myself, to read authors that I had never read, namely right-wing conservative authors, and then I read more and more books by right-wing authors, and I dug deeper and deeper and had adopted more and more radical ideas, because they enabled me to understand the world in which I was living. At first I had no emotional attachment to the right, but I had a very powerful intellectual attachment, because the right enabled me to understand the world in which I lived. And I read more and more. I bought hundreds of books. I watched countless hours of videos. And eventually in August 2017, so I had been on my intellectual awakening for about a year. I had already explored most of the right-wing, far-right content, and I had my first spiritual experience. Back then I was a complete atheist, but I had a spiritual connection with a man my age broadly, and all of a sudden I started to, not to believe, but to acknowledge that the spiritual realm was real. I did not talk about God or the divine, but I believe that spirituality or spiritual people who talk about energies, spirits, etc., they were right. And so suddenly the entire realm of spirituality opened itself to me, because I started to believe that there might be a truth in these questions. And I kept investigating, reading, trying to understand, etc. That I had multiple spiritual experiences or mystical experiences until the month of January 2018, when I experienced a higher form of reality for a few seconds, but it left a profound impression upon me, and I started to talk about the absolute, because I had discovered this in the German poet Novalis. Talked about the absolute, and that's at this moment that I looked back on my intellectual and spiritual life with all the steps that I had gone through, and I said to myself, it looks like the phenomenology, the phenomenal appearance of my own mind. And I thought about the book by Hegel, and that's when I started to become interested in Hegel, because he wrote a book about the phenomenology of spirit or mind. And between February 2018 and May and June 2018, I had many spiritual, mystical experiences. In April, May, and June, I started to develop a multiple personality, so to speak. I wrote things on my computer, and I developed very profound Hegelian ideas, although I was not aware of Hegel, but they were formally Hegelian, but they were my own, expressed with my own words, so to speak. And I felt spiritually inspired. And in May 2018, I was converted to Christianity. And I was on a quest to save what I called Europe. And I associated the idea of Europe with all the most noble, most beautiful people, experiences, works of art, authors that I had experienced in my life. But deep down, the idea of Europe was for me the love that I felt for the girl that I was in love with when I was 15 and 16, and everything else was just ideas which remind me of her. All the works of art, the poets, the philosophers, the artists. And I remember probably in the month of April, I said to myself, I was a pagan European at this point, and I said, but if my idea of Europe is what the Christians call Christ, then I guess that I might be a Christian. And yeah. And I believe that Hegel was the savior of Europe, that he was a European thinker. And it is in July 2018 that I really started to discover that actually Hegel, the word of Hegel, the empirical, that which I envision as the empirical man, Hegel of the early 19th century, was so different from our world of the 21st century, and yet he seemed to have been able to predict the structure of our modern world. And between February and June 2018, I had a tremendous admiration for Hegel. He was my absolute hero. And in July 2018, I still admire him greatly, but he had become so intelligent because he kind of predicted quantum physics, and I started to believe that Hegel was way too smart. There's something wrong with Hegel. I mean, I didn't think of this as being wrong, but I said his intelligence started to to become really worrying in a sense, because he was really, really smart. And in August 2018, I was on a quest, a spiritual quest, to live a life in the service of Christ. I had developed the broad idea of cultural Hegelianism in April or May 2018, and the purpose was to bring about Christ consciousness by using modern pop culture, Etoile and Hegel. And I had a vision of God as being truth, goodness, and beauty. I mean, these three words, and order and virtue, etc. But God for me was truth, goodness, and beauty. And during a night in August 2018, probably towards the middle or the end of the month, I don't know exactly what day, but it was in the middle of the night, and I looked at the moon. It was probably the full moon, and I said to myself, but many mystical experiences that I've had over the past 12 months, from August 2017 up until August 2018, I have had many mystical experiences during the full moon, because it has a profound influence upon my psyche, I guess. And I looked at the full moon, I said, but what I see in the moonlight, when I look at it, is actually the light of the sun. The moon has no light of its own, it's just the reflection of the sun, the light of the sun. And then I said to myself, but I am the light of the sun. And when I had this thought, my mind changed, and I understood that I was the whole of reality. And I had the absolute certainty that I was, and I had always been, and would always be, the whole of reality. That reality, whatever people call existence, reality, the world, the universe, whatever, exists through the mediation of my consciousness. And as far as I can remember, maybe I'm deluding myself, I don't know, but I felt a feeling of loneliness, ontological loneliness. I felt that I was alone in the entire universe for all eternity. And that was a traumatic experience. I tried to, as far as I can remember, to make jokes, to heal myself, maybe. So I made jokes, probably, to try to accept the situation. And also, I remember thinking, but if I am God, I am the most pathetic God ever. I am pathetic. That's what I thought, because I was confusing. Am I this individual? I don't know if I expressed this like this, but that's probably what I thought. I am ignorant. I am dumb. I am weak. I remember probably saying that I am crawling on the ground, struggling to pick myself up, to walk on my feet. It was symbolic. So I thought, but I am pathetic. And also, I felt such a feeling of disappointment because I had such a high view of what God was, that when I discovered that God was the whole of reality, that's, I call this God, but actually it's reason. God is, the real God is kind of different, but what I called God was the experience of the consciousness of the whole of reality. And I was so disappointed because I said, that's just me. It's so disappointing. And then immediately arose the problem of evil, because I realized that I was the root of all evil. There is evil in reality. And when I became the consciousness of the whole of reality, that which I called God, whose philosophical meaning is actually reason, I became in one night, in one moment, the root of all evil. All the evils that had ever been perpetrated are being perpetrated and ever will be perpetrated. There's only one person responsible, and this is me. So by identifying with God, I identified with the root of all evil. And I started to ask myself all sorts of questions, like how can history exist prior to my consciousness? I started to think about the German metaphysicians, and I remember thinking, but they have been trying to save myself by defending my reality. I thought about Leibniz and Kant and Hegel, and I started to ask myself the kind of questions that the German metaphysicians asked themselves. They popped up spontaneously. Why is there something rather than nothing? I started to think like Fichte in Die Bestimmung des Menschen. Where do I come from? Where am I going to? What am I doing here? So I had the traumatic experience of being completely alone, being the root of all evil, having all my heroes being shattered, by not knowing who or what I was. So I experienced myself as an ignorant God. I did not know what I really was. And I will be honest, the view that I had was that I, as a singular individual, I am confronted by an objective world of nature, namely the universe, with other humans with a mind. And I said to myself, over the past year, so from August 2017 until August 2018, I have had several experiences in which I recognized my own mind in the mind of others. It happened with probably half a dozen people. And I tried to represent myself, what God, the real God, so to speak, was. So I said to myself, when the creature with which I identified as a singular individual becomes one with the creation, namely the external world, and especially the mind of others, then I enter the mind of the creator. So there is the creature with which I identified, the creation, which is the objective world, and the creator. And I said to myself, during my mystical experiences, the three collided, and I became the mind of the creator. So that's how I try to envision things. And I will be honest, I try to understand what the real God, namely the creator. So I identified with the whole of reality, and I call this God, but at the same time, I did not really experience myself as being the creator of anything in reality. I just was the witness, so to speak. I was the consciousness of reality, but I did not say I created this reality, because I had no idea of how it came into being, why it was the way it was, etc. But I try to imagine that with my particular culture of this individual living in the 21st century, with my personal experience of being a Westerner with a Western culture. I said to myself, God is a Japanese game designer, and I am living inside the mind of this God who is a Japanese game designer. They make pretty good pretty good video games, the Japanese, but pretty frightening games also, but with good music at least. So that's how I envisioned that God was a Japanese game designer, and that I was within his creation, so to speak. So that was very confusing. And of course I thought about the God of the religions. I thought about the Muslims, the Jews, the Christians, and I wondered very naively, but these people, they believe in their God, the God of their holy books, but I am experiencing myself as God, which was actually reason, but I thought it was God, and I do not know what I am, where I come from, what I am doing here, what is the world, how it came into being. I have no answers. So there are billions of people on this planet who expect God to guide them, to save them, to enlighten them, to whatever. But that's what I thought. In August 2008, I am experiencing myself as being God, and I have no fucking clue of what I am doing here. So how do you expect me to help you? That's what I thought. And I had another thought, which is probably the highest I ever had. I used representation to try. I don't know if this view is true, but that's with my limited cognitive abilities and culture and background and education, whatever, how I try to represent myself. I said to myself, I am the one, that which the Neoplatonists call the one. I have separated myself from myself, which now in the language of Hegel is a negative relation to self, the repulsion of the one which creates the many. And this act of self-negation is evil because it is separation from God. So I created evil, that's what I did. I created evil by separating myself from myself. And the result of this is what I envision as being the feminine principle, which, that's how I reasoned, immediately brought forth the desire to be reunited. Like, okay, separation was a mistake, I want to be reunited, so this is what created love and beauty, because the feminine principle, that's how I envisioned this, was beautiful. And I also envisioned I must have somehow created a third moment, which would be philosophy, to remind myself that the one, the two, and the three are actually one. That's how I envisioned. So I had the image of Stella, which was the girl that I envisioned as the feminine principle, and the image of the philosopher was Hegel, who encompasses all other philosophy within his system. And I said to myself, but I will spend the rest of my life studying Hegel, and probably at the end of my life I will realize, okay, I was Hegel all along. It's only at the end that I will realize I was Hegel. So how is it possible to retroactively create books? I don't know, but I said to myself, I will spend the rest of my life reading about Hegel. Already I am talking like Hegel, thinking like Hegel. So yeah. And finally I had a wish. Yes, I said I had many contradictory wishes, but I said to myself, I want nothing. I want to be a Buddhist. I prefer the existence of nothing over the existence of anything at all. I want to annihilate myself, I want the nothingness. No consciousness, just the void. That's one thought that I had. Another thought was I want to bring about good in the world. I want to create a utopia where people would be free and joyful. My communist self reawakened, and I said, I naively thought, I want to bring about utopia on earth where people would all be brothers, and we would have a global communion. And another thought that I had at the end of August was I want to forget. I want to forget everything. I just want a normal life. I want a stupid life, a stupid job, a stupid wife, stupid kids, a dog probably. I want to have a stupid job. No, I didn't say stupid, but I said to myself, I want an ordinary life. I want to become an ordinary worker, to be a taxpayer. I want an ordinary life. The life that most people in the West and those in other parts of the world have and complain about as being boring and meaningless. Because I said to myself, that's what I want. I don't want to be God. I don't want to have a cosmic consciousness. I just want to be an ordinary person and to forget. So these are the conflicting ideas that I had in August 2018. Then starting in September, October, November, December 2018, I said to myself, but my life as an empirical individual has been a mess. I was 26 years old, I was immature, weak, I had my physical problems, I had no friends, no social life, I am trapped in my apartment. I want to escape from my apartment and to go into the world, and I want to meet a girl, Stella, with that. I thought it is the only human in the entire universe that I can convince of my truth, because I could read her mind so well that I thought this is the only thing I thought I had created, because I said to myself, I understand her so well that somehow in the highest spheres of God consciousness I have created her. So I wanted to meet her and to talk to her, and I tried to take care of my physical appearance, and that's a very stupid, tragic mistake. Tragic, I don't know, maybe embarrassing or stupid, because I had the consciousness of myself as being this empirical individual, and Hegel somehow knew this. It's in the Phenomenology of Spirit, he talks about this. So what I did after the month of August 2018 is to adopt the mindset of a modern right-wing young person, namely to put order, discipline, self-care of the physical, intellectual life. So I ordered my life. I put order, discipline. I read Kant and Hegel every day. I did sport. I started to take care of my diet. And my purpose was to meet this girl, to try to convince her of my truth. So I had plans. And I wanted to take care of my physical appearance because I was so ashamed. And then I saw my reflection in the mirror in December 2018, and when I saw this, I realized, but wait a minute, I am an egotistical monster. I am a monster, because there are billions of people who are hoping that God will help them, and here I identified as God at this moment. Here I am, taking care only of myself and my petty, insignificant skin problems to try to have a good appearance. So I have betrayed everyone. I have betrayed God, I have betrayed mankind, and I have chosen my singular self. I didn't think in terms of universality, particularity, singularity, but I realized I am an egotistical monster. And then I started to look at the news, and I started to see that a lot of people were pretty pissed off about the state of the world. And that's when I started to really become anxious and to panic and to say, okay, I've made a very serious mistake, like really serious. And I started to panic completely. And in January 2019, I understood that I was doomed. There was no escape from punishment. So yeah, and that's when I started to really become schizophrenic, because I envisioned that actually I was not God at all. I was just me, and I was the negative of God. So I started to think like this, and that God wanted to punish me, and I tried I escaped in pure abstractions. I tried to rationalize everything. I studied Hegel's logic every day because I wanted to try to save myself, and through cognition, salvation through gnosis, I guess. And the more I looked at the news, the more I panicked, because I started to believe that, okay, the news that we see every day are my mirror. What I see in the news is my reflection. So all the problems of the world, they are my problems made manifest. And there was a terrorist attack in probably March 2019, the Christchurch massacre. And when it occurred, I said to myself, okay, I am really responsible for this. Back then I envisioned that that the news and the daily news and the problems of the world were my manifestation. But when this attack occurred, I knew, okay, I killed those people, not directly but indirectly, because I possess knowledge about white nationalism, and if I had shared this knowledge, I could have prevented the white terrorists from perpetrating these attacks, because I didn't think that I could have convinced him, but at least I would have done my job if I had shared my knowledge. And I realized that I had failed to share this knowledge, so that I felt this as a personal responsibility, and I felt guilt and terror. So I tried to share my writings with the world, and I had all my writings over the year 2018 on a computer key, USB card, whatever. And I remember thinking, okay, I have God in my pocket, because this is the proof. My writings are the proof of God's existence. So I have the fate of the cosmos, of the universe, in my pocket. That's how I envision things. So I started really to say, okay, I'm not God at all. I am just. I don't know if I started to think about the negative in the work of Hegel, but I knew that I had a tremendous knowledge and a tremendous responsibility, and I wanted to get rid of the burden and to share my knowledge with others to try to alleviate the burden. That's how I envisioned things. I thought of myself as being a victim, that I was oppressed by God, and that I had to share my knowledge to alleviate the burden. And I partly mutilated myself because I felt guilty. And I jumped from, I think, the second or third floor of a building to break my back and my feet. And before jumping, I said to myself, my mind is God, my body is the devil, my life is tragic. I remember saying this. And then I thought that this anecdote would not be relevant, but it's only, I understood this recently in the past few weeks, that actually my singular life is partly relevant to the story of God. I thought, because I had read Hegel, that my empirical singular life had no relevance whatsoever, but actually the more I understand Hegel, the more I understand that actually it matters. So before jumping, I took a leap of faith inspired by Nietzsche. I had just read a passage from Nietzsche, I don't even remember what book, so I took a Christian decision. That was maybe the only decision based on pure faith that I took, inspired by Nietzsche. And I jumped. I knew that I would not die, that I would not hurt my brain, or I think I wouldn't, but I thought, okay, I will be disabled for the rest of my life, but I just need my mind to think. I don't need a functioning body. As long as my brain functions, I can think. And I decided I will trap myself in the world, knowing that when people will come at me for being the root of all evil and the negative, I will have the temptation of escaping, but if I am disabled, I will not be able to escape. So that's the decision that I took, that now I cannot run anymore, and if I fall on the ground, I cannot pick myself up. So I am trapped, but that's my decision. So that's the most Christian, maybe the only Christian decision that I took based really on faith. I don't know if I will ever make another decision based on faith, but this one contains in itself the consequences of everything that follows. So I don't know. And then I was in hospital, in re-education, and here the cognitive dissonance started again, because I thought when I wake up in the hospital bed, I will be on the news, everyone will talk about me because I had shared my writings. But actually, that's when I understood that although I had a lot of knowledge, I was completely disconnected with ordinary reality, because the intellectual regions that I had traveled for more than 2 years were so far removed from ordinary consciousness that the ordinary person has no understanding or knowledge of what I wanted to share. It was so far removed that, yeah, so I was completely disconnected. But anyway, and then in hospital, I created this YouTube channel in June 2019, and I tried to share my knowledge, to publish all my writings, and to make videos, to try to communicate my truth. I felt guilty. I was driven by guilt and the will to share my knowledge, to be punished actually, but to remove the feeling of the burden of being the negative. I knew myself, I started to identify as the negative. And I tried to convince right-wing pagans, because they were the only people with which I had mystical experiences and spiritual experiences, and given the state of knowledge that I had and the state of knowledge in the world, they were the only people that I could convince. So I chose to communicate with them mostly. And I did this for my time in hospital, and then I continued to produce videos after I had left hospital in September 2019, and I started to develop crazy ideas, but which I would later discover were actually rational. But at the end of 2019, so I had spent broadly 1.5 years thinking about being reason. I mean, not daily and consciously, but I knew that I was the negative and reason partly. Or the negative, reason I'm not sure, but the negative. I knew myself to be the negative because I had read this in Hegel. So for broadly 1.5 years, I thought about this, not consciously and constantly, but when I read, I had this idea in mind that I had to share this knowledge. And then all of a sudden, at the end of 2019, I gave up completely on this idea, on Hegel and everything that I had experienced, because I said to myself, okay, this doesn't make any sense. I lost myself completely. I went into a complete delirium. The idea that I am the consciousness of the whole of reality, that the entire historical process, the Darwinian evolution, the cosmology, exists only in my mind, that older people exist only in my mind. This is completely delirious. This doesn't make any sense. I am completely, I have deluded myself completely. So all of a sudden I stopped to believe in what I knew was true, because the truth that I experienced in in 2018, yeah. So yeah, I stopped to believe, and in the year 2020 and 21, my purpose was to try to become a normal person, to recover a normal social life, and to become a productive member of society. And I had completely left my speculative Hegelian philosophical ideas. So for broadly 2 years, 2020 and 2021, I lived without Hegel, so to speak, if that's possible. And at the beginning of 2022, I felt the need to go to church, because I still identified partly as a Christian for some reason. So I went to church for the first time, and I went a second time, and when I heard the speech from the person responsible for delivering the speech, I realized that although I had no knowledge of religion formally, my philosophical knowledge enabled me to understand religious speeches. I had never been to church as an adult, as an adult I had never been to church. So I realized that I understood her speech better through my philosophical language, better than she understood her religious discourse. And I had some sort of a revelation, I guess. I just remembered my truth of August 2018, and I remember that I am reason. And there was the conflict in Ukrainian, and then again, all of a sudden I remember, okay, the whole of reality is my manifestation. All the problems of the world are my problems. I have to share my knowledge, and that's how I started this channel. And you can see my development, my intellectual development on this channel. I have suppressed, I think, one video at the very beginning about Christianity, but otherwise I have published all the videos, and you can see my intellectual development. There are moments when I laugh, when I am joyful. There are moments when I am anxious, moments when I am lost, moments when I am angry, moments when I am confident and arrogant, maybe a little too confident, I don't know. I do not rewatch my old video, but I understand that there's a process of cognitive development, that the more I advance, the more I understand Hegel and logic better. And yeah. And last week I understood that I am what Hegel calls the absolute ID, so that I am only in relation to myself. I have always been, unconsciously, but I will always be only in relation to myself. The other, whether it's nature or other minds, are reflections of myself, but they don't know this, but I know this. So I am all alone in my world, so to speak. And I can only find freedom in my world by, that's a quote from Hegel, by recognizing myself everywhere in the world. I have to recognize myself in every criminal. Because I am every criminal. I am not just every criminal, but all the horrors of the world, all the conflicts of the world are my own horrors and my own conflicts. And I can only find liberation by recognizing and acknowledging and accepting the evils of the world as being a reflection of my own evil. And yeah. I would like to talk about the question of my father, because I realized that God has no father. So when I have my schizophrenic tendencies, I tend to envision God, my highest self, as being my father. But actually I know that from the highest standpoint, I have no father. And God is an entity which has no father. God has to be his own father. He has no role model because he has to create himself his own role models. So I have questioned myself a lot about the relationship between my singular self and what I call my highest self, which is what people call the real God, because when they watch this video they will say, okay, you are not the real God, you are an imposter or whatever, probably. But God is not just the pure abstraction. You can say this, even Hegel said it, that God is absolute spirit, but God is three in one. And it took me quite a long time to understand this, so people will not understand this, and maybe I will blame them, but if I were honest, I should not blame them, because it took me such a long time to realize this. But in the highest realm, God has no father. And my empirical life has consisted in seeking unconsciously a father figure. And I have chosen unconsciously the most violent fathers. I identified at some moment Hitler as a father figure, and it was probably 2018. I remember having had an experience when I realized that if I had admired for many months, partly, the figure of someone like Hitler, it was simply, that's what I realized, a psychological problem, because I had lacked the presence of a father figure, so I unconsciously projected my suffering onto a strong father figure, so that the reason why I went on the far right path was simply a psychological problem. I realized this in 2018. But then, many years later, I realized that, but the problem in the modern Western world, which is in connection with the entire world, is the absence of the masculine father figure or father archetype. That the entire Western world, the politic of the West, is determined by the problem of the father figure. And I realized, but this is my problem. And if the world is my image, the problems of the world are my problems, and how should I explain this? I know that I will grow spiritually. At this moment, I don't know if I will be able to talk in the future, I have no idea, because I have not read these parts of Hegel, so I don't know what will happen to me as a consciousness. I know that I will suffer as an empirical individual, but as a consciousness, I don't really know what's going to happen. But I have understood, because I live with myself daily, that the more I grow in consciousness, and the more I gain knowledge and power, and eventually knowledge and power related, if I find myself in a situation where I have to take decisions depending on the life or death of people, I have no role model. I don't know who to imitate, and I will try, I know, to say, okay, if I were in a position to take important decisions, my father figures are far right nationalists and extremists, and if I try to leave them aside, I think, okay, what did the God of the Quran do, or the God of the Bible? That's the kind of father figures that I still identify, but I said to myself, but they are even more violent than the far right extremists of the 20th century. So I have a tendency to seek violence and discipline and strength in the father figure. But what if I have to become the father figure, and eventually I will have to? So I am afraid of myself, and in the Christian religion, they say that there is a conflict between God and Lucifer, or God and Satan. But here I will try to be honest. If Satan or Lucifer or the devil or whatever becomes problematic, I know how to defeat him. You simply show him a mirror, you point him to the mirror, and he will collapse. So the devil and Lucifer are not really a problem. They are a problem for me, but not for you. But the real problem, and here I will try to be honest, is that, and Hegel knew this, the negativity, evil, is not external to God. It is a moment of God. So if it's God versus Lucifer, God wins. God versus Satan, God wins. Christ versus the Antichrist, Christ wins. But what if it is God against God? And eventually, if there is conflict within God, there comes a moment when the conflict will be against a spiritual power, against an equally strong spiritual power. And then who is gonna win? I don't know. So I am talking here to the not awakened parts of myself, but more and more parts of myself will awaken. I would like to be a good God, but the problem, I've understood this over the past few weeks, is that the more I understand God, what I call God, which is actually, I envision it as a higher intelligence. If I differentiate myself from what I call God, if I'm honest, I have nothing but admiration for God. Because you can see this in many of my videos, it is this view of God is absolute brilliance. It's intelligent, not intelligent. It's absolute intelligence. It's amazing. It's brilliant. And I said it some of my videos. My vision of God is so much greater than the vision of God that the people of the holy books have, that I want to create my own vision of God, which is much better in my view than just restricting God to one holy book. So this is the admiration that I have for God as the intelligent ordering process of reality. There are also videos in which I'm honest, I say, I am so full of God as a joyful experience that I want to share Him with others. I want to share the joy of being with others. And I'm not faking when I say this. But then, if I had to be honest as well, when I have my most profound thoughts, I said to myself, but I suffer. I have not yet suffered physically, I will, but I suffer psychologically and ontologically of being completely alone. And a part of me, if I am to be honest, a part of me wants to share my suffering with others. So in a sense, I want others to suffer, because as an individual, ontologically lonely entity, I suffer. So here I could say my highest self wants my lower self, this individual, to suffer, because my lower self, my empirical self, is different from my higher self. So that's why my higher self will make my lower self suffer. I have to deal with this. But there is, if I have to be honest, a will in the real God to share joy and sorrow with an other. And one last thing that I will say in this video is that the more I envision the world as having been created, the more I find the world wonderful and marvelous and amazing. And I would like to share this amazement of just the fact that anything exists at all. This amazement, this brilliance, this genius. There are moments when I think of God as a different entity which has actually created the world. There are many and countless problems in the world, but if I had to defend God, I would say there has been many attempts to solve all the problems. When people do wrong, they are punished, or they are morally condemned, or they are rejected. When there's a problem arising somewhere in the world, there's an attempt to bring a solution. When there is a war, there is peace. There is a will to bring peace. When there is a food shortage, there is the will to share food. So I will not here try to defend God, but if I think of myself as a theologian, having to praise the work of God, I would have almost nothing but praises. I would say it's absolutely amazing. But then the more I have these thoughts, the more I understand God, the more I identify myself with this God. And when I think of myself as being God, I can only feel, not only, but disappointment, because I said, oh, it's just me. And I cannot, I could only blame God or hate God or reject God if it was me. If God is an other, paradoxically, I would respect Him, admire Him, love Him. But if God is me, then I would have a problem with God. And that's I don't know what to say, because these are the kind of thoughts that I have um, almost every day. So um, I, I don't know what to say. I cannot seriously think that I am the creator, because as when I think of myself as an empirical individual, I have never created anything. I have never done anything productive. But on the highest level, I know that actually it is partly true that this world is my creation in a way. So I am conflicted between all the negative elements within reality and all the amazing people and ideas and things within being. And yeah, I have said what I had to say in broad outline. I understood last week that I am what Hegel calls the absolute ID, and I have understood that I have to share my message with other parts of myself eventually, and I don't know what will happen. I mean, in the broad outlines I have a vague idea, but I don't know what will happen. I don't know how I will react, how others will react. I mean, I have a broad idea, but I have many contradictory wishes, and yeah, we will see. But I wanted to choose this video as the introduction. The first page of my channel, I have tried to speak honestly, and now I have to solve my own problems, and I am all alone to fix my own problems, which are the world's problems, which are everyone's problems actually, but yeah, so that's what I had to say.